position previews, and this time we're diving into the outfield. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, November 11th, Tuesday, November 12th. Whoops, that's the day that we're recording this. I am Frank Stample, joined by Scott White and Chris Sowers. Today on the show, we'll be focusing mostly on outfield recap, but because it's such a massive position, we'll break it down into 2 episodes this week. So today we'll take a look back at the top 24 that finished at the position, and then save our early 2025 rankings for the next podcast. Scott, you are back. How was your week off? Did you do anything fun?
I had a lot of house projects that I did, stuff that I never have time to do during baseball season because I'm busy keeping up with
baseball,
daily baseball coverage, and you know, chasing the kids around and all that. I did a few fun things, but probably not fun to talk about. Just like, again, things I don't get time to enjoy during the baseball season.
Probably not as fun as, I don't know, Roki Sasaki being posted to MLB teams this offseason. So before we even talk about the outfield, let's just start with that because it feels like it's pretty big news. Chris and I kind of touched on Roki Sasaki last week and some expectations we had if he were to be posted. And it sounds like that will indeed happen. So Roki Sasaki, 23 years old, a phenom in Japan, starting pitcher, 4 seasons in Japan, 2.02 ERA, a .88 whip, 524 strikeouts, over 414 and 2/3 innings, 11.4 K per 9, 2 walks per 9. And because Sasaki is under 25 years old, he has not reached 6 years of service time in a foreign major league. He is subject to international bonus pool. So he will not be getting this massive Yamamoto contract. In fact, it'll be closer to what we saw Ohtani get back in 2017 when he signed with the Angels for just $2.315 million. So just to kind of give everyone an idea, like when you see this contract, it's not going to be that massive contract that we've seen from previous pitchers that came over from Japan. Scott, it feels like the Dodgers are the overwhelming favorite here. I mean, what are your thoughts on Roki Sasaki? Where do you plan on ranking him for 2025 redraft leagues?
Well, I know Chris wrote a big article kind of scouting him, and so maybe we should start with Chris, but I'll go ahead and give you my 2 biggest thoughts on Roki Sasaki since you started with me. First of all, really, really talented, obviously. I've seen him I've seen highlights of him hitting 102 on the radar gun. He has a good splitter, as is common for pitchers in Japan. Really talented, somebody to be excited about. But I don't want to get carried away because, as we'll talk about next week, as we start to go through the starting pitcher position, it is so deep. And as I was going through my rankings there, I felt like I was ranking everybody too low. So a lot of times there are certain years where starting pitching, you know, there seems to be this scarcity at the top. Mm-hmm. And so a newcomer comes along with a lot of talent, and we don't exactly know how to quantify it. But we need something to hope for. And so we reach for him. We reach for the unknown, hoping to get the best case scenario. And I don't think we need to do that with Roki Sasaki. I would rather play it cautiously. I mentioned he's hit 102 before, but I was reading from Jeff Passan that last year velocity was down across the board. So is that something, he was coming back from an arm injury as I understand it, so is that something that's going to carry over into this year, and might that impact the upside? There are reasons to wonder. Having said that, he's 23 years old, so like he's kind of just at an age where most pitchers are getting started, and there's a lot of development I would imagine still to come for Roki Sasaki. So reason to be optimistic, I think, especially in dynasty leagues, but just given the distribution of talent at starting pitcher, I don't think it's beneficial to take a glass half full here, if a glass half full approach, if you'd normally be inclined to do so.
Chris, you gave us a little bit of a taste last week on your opinion, some thoughts on Roki Sasaki. As Scott mentioned, you wrote an in-depth article kind of scouting him and maybe what to expect for this upcoming season. So how would you summarize that article that you put out?
He is, I think, one of the most exciting pitchers who has never thrown a pitch in Major League Baseball. Maybe the most. Like, I think you compare him as a prospect to like Andrew Painter, probably more proven than Andrew Painter because he has done it against not Major League level competition, but a high level of competition. He's not coming back from Tommy John surgery. Like if we're talking about players who have not established themselves as major leaguers, I think Roki Sasaki is about as exciting as they come. However, there are a couple things to keep in mind. One is, like you mentioned, or like Scott mentioned, he's not coming back from an injury. He dealt with an injury last year. There was some kind of arm injury. I haven't seen any specifics on it. I think the reporting culture in Japan around sports is a little different than in America. So I'm not sure anybody has pinned down exactly what it was. He also had an oblique injury the previous year. He's only made 33 starts over the past 2 seasons. His fastball velocity dropped from 98.9 miles per hour in 2023 to 96.9 miles per hour in 2024. That's a 2 mile per hour drop. His strikeout rate dropped from 39.1% to 29%. So still really good. Still a better strikeout rate than Yoshinobu Yamamoto managed in any of his final 3 seasons in Japan. So really, really elite strikeout pitcher. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is you'll look at his numbers in Japan and see, whoa, he had a 2.35 ERA. That's incredible. Paul Skeens had a 1.99, but I don't think anybody else in Major League Baseball had a better one last year. League average was 3.15 in Japan. They are in the middle of like an all-time dead ball era. And so when you go by ERA plus, what you have is Roki Sasaki in 2024, 129, which would have been a top 10 mark among MLB qualifiers last year, but not quite as impressive as 235 sounds. For context, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, his final 3 seasons in Japan, his worst ERA plus was 188. He had seasons of 250 and 272 ERA plus. You're talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto was doing peak Pedro Martinez stuff in Japan. Roki Sasaki was doing like, I don't know, Blake Snell stuff. Like he's good, but it's not the quite same level of production as what Yamamoto was doing. And then you have the injuries, the fact that he's never thrown 130 innings in a professional season, the fact that he has never thrown every 5th day and instead of every 6th day like they do in Japan. You have there's always an adjustment period for pitchers coming over from Japan because they use a slightly different baseball. I say it all to say this is a very exciting young pitcher who is much less of a sure thing than Yoshinobu Yamamoto was a year ago. And I think because Yamamoto came over last year, because he was so good, I know he missed a lot of time with injury, but pretty much lived up to expectations when he was on the mound. I think people are just going to, in their mental model, swap in Roki Sasaki for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and you should not do that because Yamamoto he won the Triple Crown 3 years in a row. I think he was the MVP 3 years in a row in Japan. Sasaki is not that yet.
I don't think we're going to see Sasaki ranked like top 12.
I don't think top 12, but I've seen a lot of people say top 15, and I just don't see the point.
I can't even get Yamamoto in my top 15.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I get it. He's an incredibly exciting young pitcher. The splitter had a 57% whiff rate last season in a league that strikes out and swings and misses less than the majors. Like that might be a legit plus pitch. The slider looks really good as well. But I think he's more Hunter Green than Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And Hunter Green's early ADP, I think I ranked him SP24. He's right around there in the early ADP that we have as well. I think in the 25 to 30 range is a reasonable place to rank Roki Sasaki. And I don't know if that is higher or lower than you expected based on everything else I said. Because again, I think he's an incredibly talented pitcher. if I rank him 25 to 30, I feel pretty confident. I'm just not going to draft Roki Sasaki.
Well, it's a sort of thing where you hear 25 and 30, and based on past perceptions of what 25 to 30 in the starting pitcher
sounds
rankings
low.
looks like, it sounds too low. But I'm telling you, when we go through starting pitcher, you find out some of the pitchers we have ranked in the 25 to 30 range, you'll understand.
And in terms of suitors, obviously the Dodgers are being rumored as, the most likely landing spot for Roki Sasaki. Other potential suitors, the Orioles have the second most international pool money that they can offer. The Yankees have the third most. The Padres have been rumored as well. Other teams that could make sense, the Mets, the Cubs. I read somewhere that if he waits till January 15th, I think the international bonus pool money kind of resets.
Anybody could sign him.
And you could give your whole pool to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically any team can sign him. It's just going to be, the pitch. Like, how can they coerce Roki Sasaki to come to their team?
He'll go to whatever team he wants to go to.
One person seemingly got very, very excited in these early NFBC drafts. He went 32nd overall in one league. That's too high.
Yes.
The early drafts results I've seen, they just spastic might be the best way to describe them. Like it seems like a lot of gut feeling type of picks, like just who happens to be top of mind right now. I don't know. I kind of just want to ignore them because they're so all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, like we said with our mock draft that we recapped last week, we are so early in the process that I feel like everyone is pretty much, maybe not everyone, but most people are kind of flying blind at this point. So maybe that's why we are
flying by the seat of the pants.
There you go. Quick question on Dynasty rank, Scott. Does Roki Sasaki instantly become the number one player in first-year player drafts for Dynasty leagues, ahead of names like Travis Bazana, JJ Weatherholt, and Charlie Condon? Those are typically the top three that I've seen.
Oh, I've seen Roman Anthony up there. I've seen Matt Shaw up there.
No. Just for first-year player drafts.
Oh, for first-year player drafts.
Yeah,
okay, sorry. Well, okay, yeah.
There's no question, right?
I would say so, yeah. But the point I was making, because I thought you were asking just top prospect overall, and I'm getting into prospect research right now. That's what I'm going to be working on for the next few weeks. And my takeaway there is like the top of the prospect rankings are all over the place. There's not a
pretty wide open.
1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Yeah. And so I could see. I think mainly that doesn't speak well of the current prospect crop. I think mainly that's what's happening. So I don't want to inflate the value of Roki Sasaki by saying this, but I don't think it would be crazy to put him at the top of the overall prospect list.
All right, let's take our first break, and when we return, into the outfield we go. We'll do that right after this. All right, let's take a look at the outfield position and a pretty unpredictable position. So instead of looking at ADP accuracy up top like I've done for other positions, I picked out some of the biggest misses early on and some of the biggest hits that went later on in drafts. So some of the big misses, whether it was injury or performance related from last season, Michael Harris, Luis Robert, Adolis Garcia, Mike Trout, Nolan Jones, some big hits at the position, Jarren Duran, Teoscar Hernandez, Anthony Santander, Jackson Merrill, Brenton Doyle, Jurickson Profar, Jackson Chourio, to name some of those. It feels like outfield is in a much better position than it was just a year ago. And that's even with losing some of the likes of Brent Rooker, Kyle Schwarber, Giancarlo Stanton, Masataka Yoshida. All of those players are now util only. Chris, give me one word to describe the state of outfield right now.
Deep. Deeper than it's been in a few years, at the very least. Did you want that was one word and then a few words?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, no, that totally makes sense, Scott.
Yeah, I think from the perspective, I'm not even going to give you a word. I think from the perspective of most fantasy leagues, it's going to seem deep. It's the second deepest hitter position after shortstop, I think pretty clearly. But I don't want to go overboard with that description because it does drop off very quickly around outfielder 50 in my rankings. which, okay, we're pretty far down in the rankings at 50, but if you're talking a 5 outfielder league, even a 12-team 5 outfielder league, everybody needs 60 just to fill out their starting lineup. And of course, you have multi-eligible guys in there that's going to deplete the depth further. So in those 5 outfielder leagues and like standard roto leagues, you still want to be mindful of not waiting too long to fill your outfield. And it's not just theoretical, because I had the same thought when we were doing our first mock draft a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I am in a way too early NFBC draft. It's a 12-team draft and hold. So obviously, you fill out your 5 outfielders, but the benches are really deep. You probably wind up with like 10 outfielders on your team, just including bench spots. And yeah, I mean, once you get to a certain point, it's all just platoon players, guys that are free agents. You have no idea what their roles are going to be next season. So yeah, there definitely is a pretty big cliff at the outfield position the deeper you go, which I think makes sense. Let's get into the top 24 from this past season. I'll throw these in pairs towards you guys so that we could break them down and keep things moving. But the top 2 outfielders from this past season, they came from the same team. Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, also the top 2 in head-to-head points leagues, and it wasn't really close. Aaron Judge has set this kind of new baseline for himself. He's hit over 300 with 58 plus home runs in 2 of the past 3 years. He's also played 148 plus games 3 of the past 4 years. Outside of that toe injury in 2023, I think I feel pretty good about the health at this point in Aaron Judge's career. And then Juan Soto, career year in Yankee Stadium, 288, 419 on base, 41 homers, 128 runs scored, a 989 OPS, more walks and strikeouts, the whole Soto deal there. Is a pending free agent, so we'll see where he winds up. But, Scott, do you worry at all about the mega contract, first year of a mega contract, Juan Soto potentially going to a new place and not being in Yankee Stadium again next year?
I mean, not for Juan Soto, who was a megastar from the time he reached the major leagues. The year and a half he was in San Diego was a little underwhelming based on what we had come to expect from Juan Soto. It's a difficult environment, and his home away splits suggest it really was the environment. So as long as he doesn't go to an extreme pitcher-friendly environment, he spent the first part of his career in Washington, which is about as neutral as environments get, and he was great there. So as long as he's not really on the pitching side, the environment he lands in isn't tilted so much toward pitching, I don't worry about much of anything for Juan Soto. And how they finished this past year, Aaron Judge 1 and Juan Soto 2, is how I'm ranking them for next year.
Mm-hmm. Any concern, Chris, with Aaron Judge's postseason performance? One might say that he dropped the ball.
I mean, it was concerning for Yankees fans. But no, I don't think there's any reason to think that, I don't know, the pressure got to him, or he just doesn't like October. Like, I have he gets scared easily and he doesn't like Halloween, but whatever dumb argument you want to make about it, there's no reason to think it carried over. It's going to carry over. Like, he's been kind of an underwhelming postseason hitter basically his whole career.
And he got off to a bad start this past year and still MVP numbers. Yeah.
Like, I do not expect him to hit 58 home runs again, but he did it 2 years ago, or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the baseline, I feel like.
Over the last 3 seasons, his 162 game average is a 304 batting average, 129 runs, 60 home runs, 135 RBI, 11 stolen bases. It's like, he's going to be 33 next year, very early on in the season. So, if he takes a step back, I wouldn't be surprised, but there's no reason to expect that to happen. Based on what we saw last year, he's still a 1 of 1. In some ways, he was actually better in 2024 than he was in 2022, which I wouldn't have expected. So, yeah, I think he's the clear number 1 outfielder. I'm in a way too early NFBC draft. That's a 15-teamer, and I got Juan Soto at 10. That was really surprising to me, but that seems to be where he's more middle of the first in a 15 team, maybe late first in a 12. And I'll take that every time. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If Juan Soto has a chance of dropping to 10th overall, I will just take the 10th overall pick in every 12-team league or 15-team league, frankly.
I have him. What do I have him? 4th overall.
I have him 4th. I think he's the clear 4th overall.
So anybody
player.
drafting in CBS leagues probably can't expect to get Juan Soto as late as 10th. But that's weird.
Mookie Betts went ahead of him, and I get it. He's shortstop and will be second base eligible, presumably, but
eventually,
Juan Soto's just better.
Right. Yeah. And Mookie Betts not a big bait. The one thing you could say about Juan Soto relative to other first rounders is he's not really any help in stolen bases. Mookie Betts, slight help maybe in stolen bases.
Steals are also, we talked about this in the mock draft review. Steals are easier to find at every point in the draft than any other pitch hitting category.
Yeah, and so I do think that's kind of stale thinking. People who are downgrading Juan Soto based on stolen bases just kind of reflexive. This is how I've always drafted in round 1. It may be that the scarcities change in 15-team leagues. They get outsized coverage in the fantasy baseball world when really hardly anybody plays in them. So keep that in mind too.
All right, outfielders number 3 and 4, we had Brent Rooker and Jarren Duran, 2 of the biggest breakouts in fantasy this past season. Rooker is util only heading into 2025, but sounds like he could get back to playing outfield early next season. He was dealing with forearm injury, right, for Brent Rooker? Yeah, so
that's what he had surgery on.
Yeah, so that's why he wasn't playing outfield, and so not that he'll be an everyday outfielder, but there's a chance. 39 home runs. 11 steals, 927 OPS, and you don't have to pay anywhere near that to get him. The early ADP is 76.6 on Brent Rooker. And Jarren Duran really just continued his 2023 production, but just got the opportunity to play every day this past season. There are some questions. He's batting against lefties. Will he remain with the Red Sox? We'll find those out this offseason. But yeah, Chris, 2 of the biggest breakouts this season, Brent Rooker, Jarren Duran.
Yeah, I think both of them probably had their career year, which might be surprising to say about guys who basically are both entering their 3rd seasons in the majors. But Duran is 28, Rooker's 29, I believe. So they are on the old side for players with their experience level. And I think they got pretty much everything they could out of their skill sets. And that's not a knock on them. They had awesome seasons. They're great players. I will not be drafting Brent Rooker or Jarren Duran as top 4 outfielders. I'm more likely to draft Rooker at his price.
I got to interject and remind everyone, Rooker, you can't draft him as an outfielder.
Yes,
we presume he's going to regain eligibility there at some point, but he's DH only.
But I am much more excited about drafting Rooker as a utility-only player in the 5th or 6th round than I am Duran, who's going to go probably early 2nd. Even in 12-team leagues. He's going to be mid to early 2nd in most leagues. And I think he's awesome. I think, look, there's a chance for a trade. Boston's got some crowding in the outfield that they probably need to alleviate, and selling on a career year or that year might make some sense. I don't know. I think he's a really good player. I'm not sure he's a much better fantasy player than Brent Rooker, let alone the 35 pick difference in ADP that's going to exist there.
Yeah, it's just the shape of the production that you're going to get. A lot more steals with Duran, and obviously a lot more power from Brent Rooker. The number 5 and 6 outfielders this past season were Kyle Schwarber and Yordan Alvarez. Schwarber no longer has outfield eligibility, but we're not going to do a podcast just dedicated to util only players. So we'll talk about him here. We're not expecting him to get outfield eligibility next season. Did change his approach, a lot less fly balls, and helped him up the batting average. Schwarber from 197 to 248. Will that remain? Only time will tell. And Alvarez continues to be a 4-category stud. He's great in head-to-head points leagues. Both of these guys are really great in that format. Missed some time like he normally does, but I think one of the more consistent 4-category contributors. Got no speed here, but 2 of the best mashers in the game still, Schwarber and Yordan Alvarez.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything new to offer about Yordan Alvarez, who has basically been the same player ever since he debuted, and he gets downgraded because he doesn't steal bases and he tends to miss 15 plus games every year. So that puts him more like an early second rounder when otherwise, just by the pure hitting stats, he'd be, I don't know, one of the top 6 best hitters in the game, something like that. And so that's kind of the way it's always been for Yordan Alvarez. Schwarber has got the same issue as Rooker, as you mentioned, DH only, and likely to stay DH only. I don't think
more so than Rooker, yeah.
Hope of him regaining outfield eligibility. For what it's worth, Schwarber is, excluding Ohtani, obviously, Schwarber is my highest ranked DH only player. I have him ahead of both Marcell Ozuna and Brent Rooker, given that I'm expecting him to continue the changes he made this year, where he kind of lowered the launch angle a little bit, was less extreme with the fly balls, traded off some home runs so he wasn't approaching 50 in that category, but added a bunch more batting average that makes him easier to build around. And the run RBI production is good, batting leadoff for the Phillies. He's just, you have a much better idea what to expect from Schwarber, and you can expect that stud production, I think, more completely than you can for Rooker, certainly, and Marcell Ozuna as well, Ozuna's put together back-to-back good years, but of course he's had a lot of ups and downs in his career.
The number 7 and 8 outfielders, we had Corbin, Carroll, and Teoscar Hernandez, 2 very different profiles here. For Carroll, we are well aware of how polarizing his 2024 season was by now. The first half, he hit .212 with 5 home runs, 18 steals, a .635 OPS. I mean, people had their pitchforks and they were ready to drop Corbin Carroll. Why are we still holding on to this player? And then in the second half, he hit .258 with 17 home runs, 17 steals, and a .919 OPS. A lot more fly balls, a lot more pulling the ball, and obviously things, he didn't get all the way back to where you needed him to be, but I think Carroll still finished as a top 25 player this past season. And Teoscar Hernandez, we mentioned last offseason that he had trouble seeing the ball in Seattle. Well, he went out to LA and he dominated. He hit 33 home runs, 99 RBI. He had 12 steals and 840 OPS. Continues to barrel up the ball consistently. Now he is a free agent this offseason. We would love him to go back to LA. If not, I think he's almost guaranteed to take a step back. But Chris, 2 very valuable players at the position, but they do it in very different ways.
Yeah, I think Teoscar Hernandez is probably a decent bet to just take a step back, even if he returns to Los Angeles. Obviously, it's a great place to play, and we would rather him go back to Los Angeles. But, 12 stolen bases. He was 31 years old. It was his most since 2021. His home runs, career high. RBI actually surprisingly only the second most he's had, and only 6 more than he had the previous year.
There are rumors of Boston, Chris, and
that could be pretty fun. Yeah,
that would be pretty awesome for Teoscar.
Yeah, I think Teoscar Hernandez is kind of the...
Feels like that's the last thing the Red Sox need, right? An outfielder?
They're looking for right-handed bats. They have
and they've got one of their top prospects is definitely an outfielder, but Christian Campbell can play second, right? And Marcelo Meyer is a shortstop.
Yeah, they got a lot of choices for second base too. There's a lot to sort out in Boston.
They're a team that I think, Frank and I have talked about it several times, but I think a trade with the Mariners makes so much sense for Boston, whether it's one of the prospects or I think Duran would make a lot of sense. But either way, we're talking about Teoscar Hernandez. He's kind of like what Nick Castellanos was before last season, right? Like I feel pretty confident I know what I'm going to get. About 30 home runs, a batting average that probably won't help me or hurt me. A lot of RBI, obviously, depending on where he plays. Good player, not someone you have to draft as high as he finished last year, and he's not going to go that high anyway. I think he's a really solid, number 2 outfielder, probably.
Mm-hmm.
If I could comment on Corbin Carroll here, you mentioned how much better he got from June 6th on, so kind of an arbitrary cutoff, but we're talking basically 2/3 of the season. June 6th on, Corbin Carroll was the second best outfielder in both major scoring formats, roto and head-to-head points. And that's even though he hit 256 from June 6th on. And it's still the number 2 outfielder in roto leagues, especially.
The thing that's kind of amazing is, like, outside of batting average, despite the ups and downs and everything that went along with it, Corbin Carroll kind of ended up with the season you expected. Yeah. I guess we would have hoped for more than what he steal 30 bases.
Yeah, it was
35.
More like,
yeah,
it was.
You were hoping for 40 plus,
53, and as a rookie. So,
but everything else,
35.
pretty much runs, right what you would have hoped for. Yeah, 121 runs.
Yeah,
crazy.
I think that had a big part in how high he finished. But my point was, I don't expect him to hit as low as 256 normally. Like he had a 268 BABIP during that stretch that he hit 256. And so if he was good enough to be the number 2 outfielder while batting 256, I think there's a chance Corbin Carroll, if he falls to round 2, which seems more than plausible, pretty likely, in fact, it might be a steal because I think long term I still project this guy to be a top 5 overall pick more often than not.
That was my big takeaway from the first mock draft we did was, in a 12-team league, I think I want to be in one of the final 3 picks, because I think ADP early on is not quite there. I think like Yordan Alvarez is like 18th in ADP. So, hey, I'll take a bottom 3 pick in a 15-team league too if it means I get Yordan Alvarez in the second round. But I think, like, wherever you want to put it, Lindor or Yordan Alvarez, or, someone might put Corbin Carroll there. I think there are 15 first-round caliber hitters this year, and I'll take 2 of them, thank you. And Corbin Carroll is definitely one of them.
All right, let's take our final break, and when we return, we'll continue on with our outfield recap. We'll do that right after this.
Saturdays at 3:30, it's big time. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. The number 9 and 10 outfielders this past season, Jazz Chisholm and Anthony Santander, another duo that could not be more different. Jazz got traded to the Yankees midseason and hit the ground running, pun intended. 46 games with the Yankees, 273, 11 home runs, 18 steals, and 825 OPS. That is over a 150 game pace, 35 home runs, 58 steals. Will he keep that up? Probably not. And he also needs to stay healthy. This was the first season he actually managed to do that. And Santander had himself a career year in a contract year, 44 home runs, 102 RBI, 814 OPS. He's also a free agent this offseason. Scott, we have some questions here. Can Jazz stay healthy? Will that elbow hold up? Because he suffered an injury towards the end of the season with that. Will he kind of remain on that pace? And where is Santander playing next season? So big questions here.
Well, Santander leaving Baltimore might be a good thing. He's not as impacted by the big left field, the deep left field fence as a right-handed hitter would be. He's a switch hitter, so he's spending most of his time left side. But he might hit more opposite field home runs and more home runs from the right side. You look at his home-away splits, and Santander would be better off playing elsewhere. Does that mean he could actually improve on the 44 home runs he hit? He kind of did the reverse Kyle Schwarber thing. He was putting the ball in the air more, 55% fly ball rate according to Fangraphs. It's a career high. It cost him some points in batting average. He's never been a great source of batting average, so maybe that's a worthy trade-off, like Schwarber's going the other way was. I don't like this profile. I've always had a hard time evaluating Santander properly because to me it's just all homers and nothing else. And I mean nothing else. He doesn't walk at all. If you're talking points league value, that's suppressed because of how little he walks. if he's going to hit 40-plus home runs, okay, I can live with you only hitting home runs. But it's just such a narrow margin for error, and I have a hard time with that. So where do I rank Santander next year? It's 18th at the position. And that's probably, I'm sure that's the highest I've ever ranked him. It's going to take a certain build in Roto, I think, for me to actually take him there.
The number 11 and 12 outfielders this past season, Jackson Merrill and Brenton Doyle, both names do take a little bit of a hit in head-to-head points. Merrill doesn't walk very much, though he makes a lot of contact. And Brenton Doyle has some pretty bad plate discipline himself. But two young bucks that both had breakout seasons. Merrill took off from June on. He hit 299 with 21 home runs, 9 steals, and a 901 OPS. He did all of that as a 21-year-old. So the hope is that he continues to improve. Now you'll have to spend a third-round pick to get your hands on Jackson Merrill. And Brenton Doyle was one of 10 players to go 20-30 this past season, made huge improvements. He dropped his strikeout rate from 35% to 25%. He's extremely fast. He's a great defender. He plays for the Rockies. So, yes, he's still going to be an everyday player, and obviously playing in that environment helps him quite a bit. Chris, what do you have on Jackson Merrill and Brenton Doyle?
I mean, I think you're underselling him defensively, saying he's great. He might be the best defensive outfielder in baseball. And
that's awesome. Yeah,
we usually don't care very much about defense, but in this case, I mean, that's the only reason he got a chance to be in the lineup in 2024, because he was a sub 600 OPS bat in 2023 with Coors Field. So it's not a stretch to say that Brenton Doyle is only like relevant right now because his defense was so good that the Rockies couldn't take him out of the lineup. And then he took this big step forward as a hitter in a way that actually looks really sustainable. He had a 328 WOBA, which was 71 points higher than the previous year. His expected WOBA was even higher. And you would expect, playing half your games in Coors Field, for the ex-WOBA to be lower than the actual WOBA. You'd expect the environment to inflate his production. So it's a risky profile. There's a lot of strikeouts here. There's a lot of swing and miss, just bad plate discipline in general. But if there's average raw pop, and it seems like there is, and he can strike out 25% of the time, he's going to stay in the lineup. He's going to steal a bunch of bases. It's a risky profile. And again, another guy you should not draft as good as what he did last year, but as a number 2 speed-oriented outfielder, preferably a high-end number 3, I think he's pretty cool.
The early ADP, go ahead. I was going to say the early ADP on Doyle is 93.3 as the 22nd outfielder off the board, and that actually feels reasonable.
I'm surprised. Like outfielder number 22, I was like, but then 93, it's like that. Well, that's fine. I don't care. Like the order of the outfielders, if I might have a couple of guys ahead of him, who cares, right? Like I think the overall price is fine there. And then Jackson Merrill just looks every bit like a future superstar. Top prospect he was 20 this season, right? He turned 21 like either during the season or recently.
I think during the season, yeah.
Excellent plate discipline, makes a ton of contact, hits the ball really hard when he does. And again, he was 20 years old, 78th percentile barrel rate, 70th percentile average exit velocity, expected batting average, 98th percentile. I think there's a chance, like we're not drafting Jackson Merrill this way. I do think there's a path to him being a first round player. Like gets to that 30 home run mark. He hit 24 again as a 20-year-old. Runs a little more, only 16 steals last year, but 81st percentile sprint speed. Again, it feels like a little bit of a Jackson Chourio situation where the team was probably like, you're learning a new position. Oh, yeah, he did all of that as a 20-year-old while learning a new position, never played outfield in his professional career before. It feels like one where they were like, we'll worry about the steals later. Like, let's get everything. You can run in obvious situations. And this year he might have a green light way more often. And Could he go 25-25 while hitting 300? I think that's absolutely within the realm of possibilities. I really think Jackson Merrill he's not going to get drafted as high as Jackson Chourio, and he probably shouldn't be. There probably shouldn't be
back
much.
back for me.
In ADP, it's about 12 spots.
It was hard to decide who to rank first, honestly, because I think Jackson Merrill as a hitter is a little more projectable than Jackson Chourio.
And I think Chourio probably more projectable as a base stealer. I know he wasn't much better, but I think it's probably 30 steal ceiling for Merrill. There's probably 45 steal ceiling for Chourio, but steals are easier to find than ever. And I think,
well, we are major fantasy baseball influencers here. All right. We got the #1 fantasy baseball podcast. So the fact that they're 12 spots apart in ADP on November 12th means nothing until the biggest fantasy baseball influencers have spoken. As one of the biggest fantasy baseball influencers, I say Jackson Merrill. Take him right behind Jackson Chourio. They're just as good. They're just as good as each other. And Merrill might even be better. There you go.
All right. Again, the top 12 this past season in the outfield: Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Brent Rooker, Jarren Duran, Kyle Schwarber, Yordan Alvarez, Corbin, Carroll, Teoscar, Hernandez, Jazz Chisholm, Anthony Santander, and Jackson Merrill and Brenton Doyle. We do have some news items I want to quickly move through just so we can get to some other outfielders here. Shohei Ohtani's left shoulder surgery is likely to delay his pitching debut for the Dodgers. Scott, this was a big news item, obviously, that came out while you were, doing some home improvement. But do you think Ohtani,
Home Depot?
Yeah, do you think Ohtani should still be the first overall pick next year?
I am reluctant to commit to this yet. And I shouldn't be, because we're not going to know anymore by the time we're drafting for realsies. Yeah. I don't care about him pitching, frankly, as far as fantasy value is concerned. Maybe in daily leagues, okay, you're hoping to get both the pitching and hitting contributions. I can understand that. But from a weekly league perspective, I'd almost rather him not pitch at this point, given how good just the hitting went. So the report that his return to the mound will be delayed by this surgery to his opposite shoulder does nothing to change his value in my mind. It's just the fact that he had the labrum repaired in his main shoulder for hitting, which isn't supposed to delay him hitting-wise at the start of the year, right? But how will it impact him? Will they be willing to let him run as much?
That's the one. That's the big question for me, because the injury came, while stealing a base.
Yeah.
And he ran way more last year than he ever had.
I made some changes to my rankings based on news that came out while I was out. I kept Ohtani at the top, but I am open to moving him to 2 or even 3 behind Judge and Witt.
I think 3 makes sense.
I just haven't committed to it yet. You want Ohtani 3rd, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done my overall rankings. Do we have a date for when we're supposed to have any of that stuff done? I haven't done overall rankings.
I don't think they're going to go live until like January.
All right, okay. I got time.
Like to get it out of the way.
Probably a post-Thanksgiving task for me. But yeah, I'm thinking at this point, I would probably project more like 25 stolen bases for Ohtani, and probably more like 45 homers than 50 plus. So I think and then like there's just additional risk involved, not just because of this shoulder surgery, but because he's going to be pitching. So I think I would put him 3rd. I don't think any lower than that makes any sense. But
yeah,
I feel like I'd rather have Witt and Judge. And honestly, I have no idea who should be number 1 between the two of them now. Before the injury, Ohtani felt like a pretty clear number 1. And now it's like, well, I could go either way on Witt and Judge.
Zach Neto had right shoulder surgery last week and could miss the start of next season. Neto hurt his shoulder on a slide on September 26th. You guys both previously ranked Neto as your number 11 shortstop for 2025. I have to imagine he's going to move down now.
I'm eyeballing it. I think 20.
Oh,
but it could be even further.
oh,
yeah.
I moved him down to 14.
I'm worried.
Yeah, but
especially for someone who doesn't generate premium exit velocities, right? So he
I think his
really
margin for error is
kinda-
kind of slim. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to do the pulling fly balls thing, and so
is he going to steal 30 bases again coming off shoulder surgery? That's a question.
I guess what I was thinking is, okay, I moved him down to the part of the shortstop rankings where everybody has questions. He's right just ahead of Carlos Correa, who's always hurt. Xavier Edwards, do we really know who he is? Tyler Fitzgerald, do we really know who he is? Dansby Swanson follows them, and he's fine, but he's only fine, you know. So that's why I moved Neto where I did. Obviously, I'll adjust down if we find out not ready for the start of the season means like he's missing the first 6 weeks. But I'm imagining it's more like he misses the first couple weeks.
A's GM David Force said Mason Miller is not currently talking about moving back into a starting role. So as now, looks like he should be drafted as a closer once again. Tyler Glasnow had imaging on his right elbow recently and said, quote, "It looks like it's fully healed. Hopefully it feels like it's fully healed." Alex Bregman, a free agent this offseason, is willing to move to second base, which...
So all of a sudden, like, maybe second base won't suck as much. Maybe our whole second base, because we had the Mookie Betts probably going to play the infield. There was wasn't there another player moving to second base?
Jazz might move back.
Oh, Jazz, that was the one. Yeah, like we might have Jazz, Chisholm, Alex Bregman, and Mookie Betts at second base, all of it, fairly early on in the season. So like,
let's see where Bregman signs, because he was just a Gold Glove finalist at third base, I believe I saw. So like, I'm sure plenty of teams. Maybe the Yankees will sign Bregman and move Chisholm to second base. I don't know, but yeah, let's see where he goes before penciling Bregman in at second. It would help though if he gained eligibility there for sure.
Jeff Hoffman is being pursued by some teams in free agency as a starting pitcher. Hoffman has been stellar as a reliever over the past 2 years. He actually was originally called up as a prospect as a starting pitcher, and we just saw Garrett Crochet and Ronaldo Lopez transition back into being starters, and both were awesome. It doesn't necessarily mean it would go that way for Jeff Hoffman, but hey, we have a sample size of players doing this recently, and
Seth Lugo, Nick Martinez, there's another guy too. So like this is legitimately interesting. I think we should not sleep on Jeff Hoffman potentially moving back to the rotation. It's a starter's arsenal for sure. If he can, be a mid-90s thrower in the rotation.
You shouldn't sleep on him regardless, because I think he can go to a team and be one of the top closers in baseball.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
Either way.
Agency to watch there for Hoffman. By the way, Alex Bregman wasn't just a Gold Glove finalist. He was the Gold Glove winner at third base.
So you were right that he was a finalist.
Yeah.
There you go. Nick Martinez is expected to accept the Reds' 1 year, $21 million qualifying offer. And he was great this past season. 3.10 ERA, 103 whip, had much better control than ever before. Wander Franco. Go ahead.
I was just floored that they gave him a qualifying offer.
I'm surprised he's taking it.
Well,
I'm surprised on both
apparently
ends.
His representation was floored that he got a qualifying offer too.
I kind of thought he might get like 345. Like I could have seen that.
I'm definitely keeping him in the Dynasty League.
Wander Franco was arrested in the Dominican Republic on Monday following an altercation this weekend in which guns were drawn. The 23-year-old is still due to stand trial on December 12th in the Dominican Republic involving charges of sexual abuse, sexual exploitation of a minor, and human trafficking. So we wait to hear more, I guess, about Wander Franco. Aaron Boone sees big roles for both Jason Dominguez and Caleb Durbin next season. Dominguez was expected, but this is now the second time we've heard the name Caleb Durbin from the Yankees brass this offseason. And in the minors, he hit 287, 10 homers, 29 steals with more walks than strikeouts. So if the Yankees don't sign someone like Alex Bregman, they might need a second baseman, and Caleb Durbin might be that guy. So
have you guys seen Caleb Durbin?
He's
like stocky. He
packs a punch, dude.
He looks dense.
Yeah.
Like Dan Ugla?
Yeah, like a mini
He's
Dan
shorter.
Ugla.
He's
No,
shorter.
he's like 5'6", but he's got like no neck. He's got like broad shoulders and big arms. He's a fun looking dude. I'm excited to watch him.
He's having a big AFL, and he actually has played in the AFL 2 years in a row. I saw him last year, and he was just like crushing baseballs. So
23 steals in the AFL, 23 steals in 21 games. What in the world?
I love it. He's just like, these games don't matter. Let's go.
16-5 walk to strikeout ratio.
Yeah. I mean, he's also an older player. I think he's 24 years old. So keep that in mind. But we'll see.
Not that old.
Caleb Durbin. And the Marlins have hired Clayton McCullough as their new manager. He spent the past 4 seasons as the Dodgers first base coach. So congrats, Chris.
People around the Dodgers seem to love him. I have no opinion, but yay.
He brings the culture, the winning.
He seems smart.
We'll see. Let's get back into some more outfield recaps, see how many of these names we can actually get through. And numbers 13 and 14 at the position. 2 players, very different points in their respective careers. Jurickson Profar and Jackson Chourio. So Profar, we kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It never happened. He had a career year at 31 years old. He hit 280. He had 24 home runs, 10 steals. Nobody is buying it early on, which you shouldn't. The early ADP is outside the top 200.
What is happening? Like, I was all ready to be like, oh, Jurickson Profar is going to be a bust for 2025. He's going behind Taylor Ward and
stupid.
Alec Burleson, Ceddanne Rafaela. Like, what are we doing? Like,
I felt bad that
I was the anti-Jurickson Profar guy. And I'm like, he's going one spot ahead of Jorge Soler in the outfield. Like, what?
There's no justification for that. That's why I think, like, I can't even take it seriously. I think people just aren't thinking about Jurickson Profar in these early drafts, so he's going super late. I'm not bullish on him next year by any means. I couldn't get him in my top 30. That's how I presented my initial outfield rankings. I went 30 deep. I got him exactly 30th in points leagues, which is his better format because his plate discipline is so good. But I thought it was like, man, am I going to get beat up for not having Jurickson Profar in my top 30 as good as this year was? But apparently not if we're judging from early ADP. For what it's worth, I have him 125th overall.
Yeah, I was thinking like 150-ish or something would be like the negative take on him. Yeah. And instead, the highest he's been taken in any of the 21 drafts that have finished so far is 125. Like, he's going behind Elliot Ramos? Like, what? Josh Lowe. I'm very confused by this.
Of all the analysis, Scott saying I thought I was going to get beat up for ranking Jurickson Profar. I'm just imagining him out at Home Depot and he gets approached by like the Jurickson Profar fan club and
dudes in Padres hats.
They come and beat you up.
We're the jerks.
Yeah,
that's what they call themselves, the jerks. We're here to rough you up.
There you go. Chourio, we've already talked about. He's going to cost you a second-round pick. Just wanted to point out, from June on, he hit 303 with 16 home runs, 15 steals, and an 883 OPS. He went 2020 as a 20-year-old. He cannot legally drink an alcoholic beverage until March 11th.
Where do the Brewers do spring training? Are they out in Arizona? There's a Buffalo Wild Wings next spring training is going to have a bonkers party to celebrate Jackson Chourio's 21st birthday in Peoria, Arizona.
I think it is out in Arizona, but yeah, that would make more sense.
Yeah, no, he was like, I want to say he was like 12th or 13th in WOBA among all hitters from June 1st on. That's not even like fantasy because he steals a lot of bases. He was just one of the best hitters in baseball for the final like 4 months of the season. It was wild.
You said earlier that Jackson Merrill, we're not drafting him this way, but he has the upside to be a first-round pick. And I was saying, I have him and Jackson Chourio right next to each other. So I could say the same thing about Chourio. We're not drafting him that way, but he has the upside to be a first-round pick. And I think in other years we may have drafted both of these guys that way. For as much upside as they showed at 20 years old, Bobby Witt got that treatment after his 20-year-old rookie season where he wasn't No, he wasn't first round caliber, but everybody just saw what was coming, and I think Jackson Chourio and Jackson Merrill as borderline second, third rounders are going to be potential discounts, relatively speaking.
Take them at the 2-3 turn together. two great Jackson flavors that go well together.
You pair them with Aaron Judge. There's your outfield right there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We mentioned last week in that mock draft, Beadon from Rasball had the second overall pick, and he started his team Bobby Witt, Chourio, and Jackson Merrill.
That's pretty good.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun stuff.
It's very fun.
The numbers 15 and 16 outfielders, Julio Rodriguez and Bryan Reynolds. Want to point out that Julio Rodriguez does take a pretty big hit in head-to-head points leagues. He averaged 2.7 fantasy points per game in that format. That was tied for 32nd at the position. And he's just a really streaky player. So if you play in like a weekly head-to-head format and you don't like inconsistency, like that's just kind of been Julio Rodriguez's career so far. The other name here, Bryan Reynolds, is the opposite. I mean, he is as consistent as you can imagine. Like he's the same player every year. He's hit 24 home runs in 3 of the past 4 years. He's hit between 262 and 275 each of the past 3 years, between 10 and 12 steals the past 2 years. Chris, you know exactly what you're going to get from Bryan Reynolds. You kind of want to know what you're going to get from Julio Rodriguez, but it was a down season for him this year.
I think you know what you're going to get from Julio Rodriguez. And I think 2024 was just a blip, and this is the type of player that you bet on, players who are this good when they're this young, even when things don't go right for them for 1 year, you just bet on them figuring out. We saw it to a lesser extent with Juan Soto in San Diego. We saw it with Ronald Acuna when he was coming back from his ACL. You should just, guys who are this good, this young, usually don't just forget how to play baseball. And in Julio Rodriguez's case, I had kind of written the final stretch of the season off for him because he had that high ankle sprain. He clearly rushed back from it, and I was like, well, that's it. It's a lost season entirely for Julio Rodriguez. Then he has an awesome September, 7 homers, 6 steals, 895 OPS, and it's like, okay. Now I feel like I was going to rank him as a first rounder or in that top 15 no matter what. Now I feel even better about it.
I have Corbin Carroll ahead of him, though. And
I have Carroll 1 spot ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be a weirdo.
Early ADP, Scott, Corbin Carroll is just ahead of J-Rod as well.
Everybody agrees then.
But like, I think both are viable first rounders, and I'm happy. Like, I think in the mock draft, did I take them both in the mock draft?
They're first round caliber players that are likely going to be pushed to round 2, though, at least in 12 teamers.
Yeah.
No, sorry. I took Kyle Tucker
and Carroll
and Carroll at 15, but like any combination of 2 of those plus Tatis, Julio, Yordan, Francisco Lindor, like at 2 of those guys, I think is such an awesome way to start your draft.
In a 12-team league, you could start, Julio and Corbin Carroll and just kind of buy the dips on both guys from a year ago. They were both top 5 picks. So now you can potentially get them at the turn in a 12-team league. Number 17 and 18 at the outfield position, Ian Happ and Mookie Betts. We broke down Betts on previous podcasts. So let's take a quick look at Ian Happ, who is actually slightly better in a head-to-head points league. He's a lot like Bryan Reynolds in that he's consistent. He doesn't have huge upside, but he's going to hit you 240 to 250, great OBP, 20 to 25 homers, 12 to 15 steals. And Scott, probably a more useful player in like a 5 outfielder league where you just get solid plate appearances, right? Like he doesn't blow you away, but he's going to come and he's going to do his job and he's going to play every day.
Yeah, unless the 3 outfielder league you're talking about is a points league, in which case Ian Happ's 2.95 points per game was better than Brenton Doyle, Spencer Steer, Riley Green, Bryan Reynolds. Yeah, it was up there, and that is his format because of how much he walks, mainly. I think if we're comparing Ian Happ to some of the other kind of rock solid outfielders who are limited to B-level production, like a Bryan Reynolds, So I put Bryan Reynolds in that category. Let's put Brandon Nimmo in that category. I have Seiya Suzuki in that category.
Well,
I'm putting Riley Green in that category, even though I think some believe he has untapped upside. I don't think there's a diverse enough skill set there for Riley Green. Ian Happ's at the bottom of that list, and I don't know that he deserves to be, but I expect he will. I don't know. His early ADP showing that he's quite a bit behind all of those players.
Ian Happ is currently 31st outfielder, 135.3 ADP, and he is quite a bit behind Riley Green and Bryan Reynolds and Seiya Suzuki.
Yep. And so I think I think he's a bargain, relatively speaking, because the rest of them I rank ahead of kind of more sizzly types like Brenton Doyle and Lawrence Butler. I kind of put most of that safe group ahead of them. Randy Rosarena's in that sizzle group. But then I have Ian Happ behind them.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to wrap up here. Number 19 and 20 outfielders from 2024, Seiya Suzuki and Oneil Cruz. We broke down Oneil Cruz on our shortstop recap. So let's quickly talk about Seiya Suzuki, who has also been really consistent the last 2 years. Right around a 285 batting average, 20 home runs, 850 OPS. The difference is that he upped his steals from 6 to 16. He's yet to play more than 138 games. But Chris, if Suzuki were to do that, I still think there's a little bit of untapped potential here. If we get a 150 game season from Seiya, can we get 25 home runs, 20 steals with a really good batting average? I don't think it's crazy.
I mean, the weird thing about Suzuki, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I didn't until I was looking this up earlier, but he had one horrible month this season. He had a 604 OPS in May. Every other month of the season, he had at least an 849 OPS. From June 1st on, Seiya Suzuki had an 887 OPS with 16 homers and 14 steals in 99 games. He was the number 12 hitter in baseball in WOBA, just behind Bryce Harper from June 1st on. I agree. I still think there's some upside there. I think there is, the fact that he ran so much more this year, I think is a good sign. I think probably another guy who's a little better in points leagues because of the walk rate, not helping you directly, but overall just a rock solid outfielder number 2 with, I think, fringe outfield 1 upside. I don't know if I could see a top 5 finish, but I could see, a better
Teoscar Hernandez just did, something like that.
Probably less power.
Yeah.
A little more speed, but or a better version of what Jurickson Profar did, maybe with a little less batting average. I think that range where these guys ended up as low end number 1 outfielders, I think the best case scenario for Seiya Suzuki looks something like that.
All right.
Well, I think it's interesting you're doing the month by month breakdown thing. When if you just look at the full season stat line for Seiya Suzuki, virtually identical from 2023 to 2024.
For me, it's I just didn't realize
a handful more steals.
I just didn't realize that he was that good outside of May.
Mm-hmm. The last 4 names that were in the top 24, which we won't really break down, but I'll just mention Spencer Steer, Brandon Nimmo, Nick Castellanos, and Alec Burleson round out the top 24.
I mean, it's an interesting group in that they're all kind of uninteresting, right? Yeah. I like Steer. I think the most valuable thing about him is you can just play him everywhere. He's triple eligible next season, right?
Just first in outfield.
He's not third base? Okay.
He could regain because he can play everywhere. So he could regain at some of the positions he lost.
But that's one that if the Reds decided to trade him this offseason, stay away. It's a real marginal skill set, I think.
We talked at first base about how I don't like Spencer Steer, and I think he's on a knife's edge. Mm-hmm. And I'd hate to have him when he falls on the wrong side of that knife. Is that how that analogy works? Anyway, I wanted to say with Brandon Nimmo, I feel like there's a potential for him to be undervalued here because of those boring but consistently B-level outfielders I listed off. Nimmo is actually my favorite because he added a bunch of stolen bases. He was 15 for 15 as a base stealer. First time he had double digits, but that's something that he's capable of, so I expect him to keep doing that. The run and RBI production is great. He's back-to-back years hit more than 20 homers, so I think we can trust that that's a reliable part of Nimmo's skill set now. He hit only 224, and that is
Had to have been the foot.
The outlier for Nimmo because he entered the year as a career 270 hitter, had hit better than 274 straight years. And so I look at that. If we're adding in 15 to 20 steals for Nimmo now, if we're presuming that for him, 15 to 20 steals to go with 20 to 25 homers, good batting average, good runs and RBI. That's 5 category production.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's even better in points leagues, by the way, because he walks a lot and all the reasons the player's normally better in points leagues. So I like Nimmo a lot for next year. I don't know where he's going. Where's his ADP among outfielders early on?
Scott, you're going to have a ton of Brenton
40.
Nimmo because he's the 40th outfielder. 164 is the ADP.
Behind Lane Thomas and Josh Lowe.
Well, very early, so very likely to change. But yeah, I rank him 23rd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My only concern is that the plantar fasciitis doesn't go away, and if it kind of pops back up, if it's a lingering issue. But I mean, if the batting average does bounce back, then yeah, he could be a big steal. Even with
the plantar
fasciitis, steal at that price.
Even with him hitting 224, he was the 22nd best outfielder this past year.
True. That's fair. We are going to wrap there for Scott and Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again on Thursday. Bye-bye.